The shove was sudden, the lake colder than steel, and for a breathless moment the world above me blurred. My grandson stood on the dock, his laughter scattering across the water like broken glass. He mocked me for being dramatic, blind to the truth that drowning isn't theater. It's a verdict handed down without appeal. Days later, his college fund disappeared, gone like it had never existed, and his family now stared at me in silence. This time, nobody dared to call it a joke. Before we continue, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel. 3 hours earlier, we'd arrived at the Lake Michigan rental, a cedar shingled cabin that cost more for the weekend than most people made in a month. Madison had insisted on it, saying Tyler deserved something special for finishing his freshman year, though his grades suggested he'd barely finished at all. The property manager had pointed out the life preservers, the emergency phone, the shallow swimming area marked with bright orange buoys, and all the safety measures that wouldn't matter when your own grandson decided you were worth more as content than as family. I'd been helping Brenda unpack in the bedroom when I noticed the black notebook fall from her tote bag. She'd grabbed it quickly, too quickly, shoving it back among the beach towels and sunscreen. "What's that?" I'd asked, but she'd just shaken her head. "Later, Walter. After the party." That should have been my first warning. Brenda never delayed bad news unless it was catastrophic. But the grill was calling. Tyler was already setting up his ring light by the dock, and Madison was uncorking wine at 2 in the afternoon. So I'd let it go. The afternoon had that Midwest summer perfection that makes you forget winter exists. 78 degrees, humidity low enough to breathe, clouds like cotton balls pasted on construction paper blue. I stood at the edge of the dock, trying to capture it all for Brenda with her phone, because she liked having photos to show her book club. Evidence that our family still gathered, still smiled, still pretended we were whole. The barbecue smoke mixed with the scent of algae and sunscreen. That particular combination that meant summer in the Midwest meant memories being made, though I didn't know yet what kind of memories these would be. Tyler had been performing since we arrived, narrating our family gathering like a nature documentary. "Yo, chat, we're living that generational wealth lifestyle," he'd announced to his 2,000 viewers, panning his phone across the rental property, the boat we hadn't rented, the jet skis we couldn't afford. "My Gramps owns half of Illinois," he lied cheerfully, the camera finding me just as I turned to correct him. That's when I felt his hands on my back. Not a pat, not a joke, but a decisive shove that sent me over the dock's edge. The water was 53 degrees, according to the weather report I'd checked that morning, cold enough to shock a healthy system, dangerous enough to stop an unhealthy heart. Mine had been repaired but never really fixed, held together with medication and careful living, and the kind of hope that keeps old men vertical. The dock's edge caught my shin on the way down, tearing through skin that had gotten thin with age, adding blood to the water that was already turning dark around me. My prescription glasses, the ones that cost $800 because of the progressive lenses, sank faster than I did. Through the green murk, I could see the sun fracturing into pieces like the stained glass at our church, and I could hear Tyler's voice warping through the water. "Don't be so dramatic, Grandpa. It's just a prank." But my body knew better. My body remembered the catheterization, the stent placement, the cardiologist's specific words. "Avoid cold water shock. Your heart won't handle the stress." Tyler had been in that hospital room. I was sure of it, playing some game on his phone while the doctor drew diagrams of blocked arteries on a whiteboard. Derek jumped in after what felt like hours, but was probably 15 seconds. I know, because Tyler's live stream captured it all, time stamped for posterity. His strong arms hauled me up, breaking the surface into a world that sounded too bright, too loud, like being born again but wrong. Brenda was already there on the dock, her 65 years of life experience compressed into pure medical efficiency. "Get him flat, check his pulse, clear his airway," she commanded, her retired ER nurse training overriding everything else, even the tremor in her voice that said, "This is my husband. This is the man I've loved for 43 years. This can't be happening." The CPR wasn't fully necessary. I was coughing up lake water. Not technically dead, but she did compressions anyway. 15 and 2 breaths. 15 and 2 breaths. The rhythm she'd practiced on dummies now applied to the man she'd married. Each compression pushed more water from my lungs and more rage into my heart. Around us, the party continued its grotesque pantomime. The expensive steaks still sizzled on the grill. Someone's playlist still pumped out classic rock. And Madison stood there filming it all, her phone steady as a surgeon's hand. "Dad's fine," Madison laughed, that nervous laugh she'd had since childhood when she'd broken something expensive and hoped charm would fix it. "He's always been dramatic about water. Remember Hawaii? Remember how he wouldn't go snorkeling?" But I wasn't thinking about Hawaii. I was thinking about my father, who'd survived Bergen-Belsen only to have his own brother steal his reparation money 40 years later. Before he died, shrunken to 90 pounds but still fierce, he'd grabbed my hand with those numbers still faint on his forearm and said, "The worst betrayal comes from blood, Walter. Blood thinks it owns you, thinks you owe it everything." The barbecue was still going when they helped me into the cabin, nobody having thought to turn off the grill. The $40 steaks had transformed into carbon sacrifices, smoking like offerings to a god who wasn't listening and didn't care. Tyler followed us in, his phone still recording, still narrating. "Guys, my grandpa is totally fine. He just can't take a joke. But yo, can we hit 3,000 viewers? This is crazy. Hit that subscribe button." The notification banner scrolled across my phone screen where it lay abandoned on the dock. "Tyler Vibes mentioned you in a live video, 5,000 watching now." My clothes dripped onto Madison's expensive rental carpet, each drop darkening the beige to brown, looking like blood, though it was just lake water mixed with failure. The towel Brenda wrapped around me smelled like fabric softener and betrayal. Like all the times I'd tried to teach Tyler about consequences, only to have Madison undo it with another deposit into his account. Another excuse, another "boys will be boys" that excused everything and taught nothing. "You could have killed him," Brenda said quietly to Tyler. But he was already editing the video on his laptop, adding music to some trap beat that turned my near drowning into entertainment, adding effects to make the splash bigger, my panic funnier. That night, after everyone had gone to bed pretending nothing had changed, after Derek had made 3 more drinks than usual, and Madison had taken something to help her sleep, Brenda and I sat on the cabin's screened porch. The lake was calm, moonlight turning it into something beautiful instead of something that had tried to claim me. She held my hand with both of hers, and I could feel her pulse through her palms, quick and uncertain, the same rhythm as when she'd told me she was pregnant with Madison all those years ago, back when we thought we were building something permanent. "Walter," she whispered, looking back to make sure we were alone, though we could hear Tyler through his bedroom window, still talking to his audience, still performing for people who didn't know him, and didn't care if he lived or died, as long as he entertained them. "Remember what we found in Madison's old room last month, when we were cleaning out for the garage sale? The black notebook." Of course I remembered. We'd only read 1 page before Brenda had closed it, and said we needed to think about what to do. "We need to look at it again," I said, and she nodded, her eyes reflecting the moon like promises or threats. Tomorrow, we'd drive home. Tomorrow everything will change. But tonight, I sat counting the 30 seconds I'd spent underwater, each one a small death, each one a preparation for what was coming. The drive home from Lake Michigan took 3 hours through farmland that looked like America was supposed to look. Corn reaching toward heaven, red barns that belonged on postcards, small towns with one stoplight and 3 churches. But Tyler made it feel like 30 hours. He'd posted the video before we'd even packed the cars, and his phone hadn't stopped pinging since it sounded like a cash register, if cash registers counted cruelty instead of money. 10,000 views already, he announced from the back seat of Madison's Lexus, the one she'd leased last year, despite crying poverty whenever Tyler's tuition came up, claiming they were barely making ends meet while driving a car that cost more than some people's annual salaries. Derek drove while Madison scrolled through the comments, occasionally laughing at the cruel ones, the ones that called me dramatic grandpa, and worse things I won't repeat. She'd read them aloud like they were Yelp reviews for a restaurant. This one says you deserved it for standing so close to the edge. This one thinks it's staged. Oh, this one's funny. Grandpa needs to learn to take a joke. Each comment was another small betrayal, another proof that my daughter had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who could watch her father almost drown and see it as content instead of crisis. Brenda and I drove separately in our Accord, the one we'd paid off 5 years ago because that's what responsible people did. They bought things they could afford. They saved for the future. They didn't gamble with their children's education money. She didn't speak for the first hour, just held the black notebook in her lap, like evidence in a trial that hadn't started yet. We'd found it while cleaning Madison's old room, preparing for a garage sale we hoped would raise money for Tyler's textbooks. It was tucked behind her participation trophies from high school, soccer, debate team, honor roll before the grades started slipping. Just a composition notebook, the kind you buy for 99 cents at the start of school. Black and white marbled cover that could have belonged to any student, except for Madison's name written in Sharpie on the front. The house felt different when we got home to our 2-story colonial in Naperville, the one we'd bought in 1995 when Clinton was president, and Madison was still sweet, and Tyler wasn't even imagined yet. Everything looked the same. The kitchen with its dated oak cabinets, the living room with furniture we'd been meaning to replace for a decade, the dining room table with Tyler's initials carved into one leg from when he was 7 and thought vandalism was art. But something had shifted. Like when you come home from a funeral and realize your house doesn't know someone died. Brenda went straight to the kitchen to make coffee. Not the good stuff we saved for company. Just the store brand that tasted like morning and marriage and the kind of tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. I sat at the dining room table, the same one where Madison had done her homework and Tyler had thrown his first tantrum, and where we'd celebrated 20 Thanksgivings pretending we were grateful for everything. The notebook felt heavier than physics should have allowed. Brenda had bookmarked the important page with a grocery receipt. Milk, bread, eggs, the stuff of normal life before we knew what Madison had done. The entry was dated March 15th, 2019. Madison's handwriting hadn't changed since high school. Still the same dramatic loops, the same way of making her A's look like O's, the same purple ink she'd always preferred. Took another $20,000 from the education account today, she'd written casually as a shopping list. Dad will never check anyway. He still thinks having his name on it means something. He's always been trusting like that. It's almost embarrassing. Put it all on Bitcoin. Jerry from the investment club says it'll triple by summer. We'll be rich enough that Tyler won't even need college money. The next entry, March 20th, was shorter. Bitcoin crashed. Jerry won't return my calls. Down to $3,000 in the account. Can't tell Derek he'd leave me. Can't tell anyone. Maybe it'll recover. Markets always recover, right? Then March 25th. Borrowed $5,000 from the credit card, the one Derek doesn't know about. Put it on something called Dogecoin. The internet says it's going to the moon. April 1st, and the irony wasn't lost. April Fool's Day, and the joke's on me. Lost everything, again. There were 30 pages of entries, each one a confession she'd never meant anyone to read. Each one worse than the last. The crypto gambling addiction had started small, 500 here, 1,000 there, Money she'd borrowed from their joint savings, from Derek's emergency fund, from credit cards she'd opened in his name without telling him. By page 15, she'd lost $40,000 total, between the education account and 3 credit cards Derek didn't know existed. She'd been chasing that first win, the $5,000 she'd made on Ethereum before losing it all on something called Safe Moon that was neither safe nor went to the moon. The last entry was from 2 weeks ago. Tyler thinks he has $20,000 for sophomore year. I've been telling him that for months, showing him fake screenshots I made in Photoshop. I'll have to ask Dad for it. I'll tell him the account had fees or something, that the bank made an error. He always believes me. He's always believed me. Sometimes I hate him for trusting me so much. I set the notebook down and pulled out my laptop, the one Tyler had called a dinosaur last Christmas, mocking its weight and the way it wheezed when opening more than 3 tabs. The education account login was saved in my passwords, right where it had been since I'd opened it in 2005 when Tyler was born. I'd called it the blood money then, joking that every birthday check and Christmas card with cash went straight to his future. This is his ticket to a life better than ours, I'd told Madison when I'd made her the co-signer, never imagining she'd see it as her personal casino fund. The screen loaded slowly, the way important things do when you already know they're going to hurt. $3,142.18. That's all that was left from the $20,000 that should have been there, would have been there if Madison hadn't discovered cryptocurrency and convinced herself she was an investor instead of an addict. The transaction history read like a suicide note, withdrawals getting bigger, more desperate, more frequent as she chased losses with worse bets. My phone buzzed with another notification. Tyler's video had hit 100,000 views. The comments were multiplying like bacteria, but one made me pause, different from the others. Isn't this elder abuse? My mom's a prosecutor and she says pushing elderly people into water can be charged as assault, especially if there's injury. Look at his leg bleeding. That's evidence. The username was from Illinois. Our Illinois. The comment already had 500 likes and dozens of replies asking for more information, sharing similar stories, demanding justice. The front door opened, and Madison's voice filled the house the way it always did, too loud and too confident, like she was selling something nobody wanted to buy. Dad, we need to talk about Tyler's fall tuition. It's due next week. $20,000, like we discussed. She walked into the dining room with Derek and Tyler behind her, a family unit that looked good in photos but was held together with debt and delusion. She stopped when she saw the notebook, her face doing that thing it used to do when she was 7 and got caught stealing Halloween candy, a flash of guilt before the defiance set in, before the lies started forming. "Sit down," I said, using my IRS voice, the one I'd perfected during 30 years of audits, the one that made tax cheats confess before I even asked questions. "All of you." Tyler was still looking at his phone, watching his follower count climb like a slot machine, hitting jackpot after jackpot. Derek looked confused, the way he'd looked since 1998 when Madison had announced she was pregnant, and he was going to do the right thing, even if the right thing meant marrying someone he'd known for 3 months. I turned the laptop toward them. $3,000, I said, letting the number hang in the air like an accusation. That's what's left of Tyler's college fund. Your mother spent the rest gambling on cryptocurrency. Tyler's head snapped up from his phone for the first time all day. What? His voice cracked like he was 13 again, like puberty had come back for a second round just to humiliate him. Madison started to speak, but I held up the notebook, and she recognized it immediately. Her face went white, then red, then a color that didn't have a name. 40,000 in total losses, I continued, my voice steady even though my hands weren't. It's all here in your mother's handwriting. Every bet, every loss, every lie she told to cover it up, including the credit cards in your name. Derek, Derek's confusion morphed into something else. Understanding, maybe, or just the recognition that he'd been played for a fool longer than he'd thought possible. The room went silent, except for the sound of Tyler's phone, still pinging with notifications from his viral video about pushing his rich grandpa into a lake. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number, but the area code was local. Brenda looked at me and nodded. We both had the same thought. I answered on speaker so everyone could hear. Mr. Walter? This is Adult Protective Services. We've received multiple reports about a video showing what appears to be an assault on an elderly person. Over 50 reports in the last 24 hours. We need to schedule a home visit to ensure your safety. Can we come by tomorrow morning? Madison's face went from white to transparent. Tyler finally put down his phone. And Derek, for once in his life, said exactly the right thing. What the hell have you all done to this family? The investigator arrived at 9 sharp the next morning, driving an unmarked state vehicle that still somehow screamed government. The kind of beige sedan that nobody buys for personal use, with the tiny spotlight by the driver's mirror and too many antennas for a normal car. She was a black woman in her 50s, with the kind of face that had seen too many deep lines around her eyes that said she'd witnessed every way families could hurt each other. Gray hair pulled back in a bun that meant business, not style. She introduced herself as an investigator, but I've forgotten her name. It doesn't matter. She was doing her job, and her job was to determine if I was safe in my own family. She sat in our living room with a tablet and an expression that gave nothing away while Tyler's video played on the screen. The sound of my grandson's laughter filled the room again, tinny through the small speakers, but somehow worse for the distance, like hearing your own funeral through a telephone. She played it 3 times, taking notes with a stylus that clicked against the screen in a rhythm that sounded like judgment. Each replay showed something new, the way Tyler had positioned multiple phones beforehand, the way Madison kept filming even when I was underwater, the way Derek hesitated before jumping in, calculating whether saving me was worth ruining his clothes. Brenda had made coffee and set out to buy cookies, the set we'd gotten for our wedding 43 years ago, back when we thought dishes mattered, back when we thought family meant something sacred. Madison sat on the love seat, her leg bouncing the way it had during parent-teacher conferences when Tyler's grades were discussed, when his behavior problems were documented, when we all pretended he'd grow out of it. Derek stood by the window, watching the street like he expected SWAT teams, though what he really feared was the neighbors seeing, the homeowners association gossiping, his reputation dissolving like sugar in rain. Tyler hadn't come. He was at home, Madison said, dealing with something important. We all knew he was streaming again, probably turning this investigation into content, calling it, "My Grandpa Got Me Investigated," or something equally tone-deaf. The investigator asked if Tyler lived with his parents, if he had access to our house, if there had been other incidents. "Define incidents," I said, and then told her about the time he'd hidden my heart medication as a prank, the time he'd posted my social security number online as a joke, the time he'd convinced his followers I had dementia and needed their donations for care. "Mr. Walter," she said, setting the tablet down carefully on our coffee table, next to a photo of Tyler at his high school graduation, smiling like success was his birthright. "I need to speak with you privately. Standard protocol." We went to the kitchen while the others waited in silence so thick you could spread it on toast. The morning light through the window caught the steam from our coffee cups, making everything look softer than it was, like a filter on reality. Like the way Madison filtered her photos to hide the stress lines, the debt lines, the fault lines in her marriage. Her questions were thorough, but gentle, designed to pull truth from people who'd forgotten how to tell it. Did I feel safe in my home? Had there been other incidents? Was I pressured not to report this? Did I have access to my financial accounts? That last question made me laugh, bitter as the coffee. "I have access," I said, "but there's nothing to access. My daughter made sure of that." The investigator wrote something I couldn't read upside down, but her face changed. Softened, maybe, or just recognized a familiar pattern. "The video is concerning," she said, her voice professional but not cold. "Your grandson admits on camera that he pushed you. He shows no concern while you're underwater for—" She checked her notes. "Approximately 30 seconds. The bloodied leg suggests force. Multiple viewers called emergency services. This isn't just a prank, Mr. Walter. This is assault, possibly aggravated given your age and medical history." She'd done her homework, knew about my heart condition, probably pulled my medical records or found them in some database where privacy went to die. When we returned to the living room, she interviewed Brenda separately, then Madison and Derek together. I could hear Madison's voice getting higher, more desperate, the way it had when she was 16 and crashed my car but swore the other driver had been at fault, even though the other driver had been parked. "It was just a joke! Dad swims all the time!" But Brenda had already told the investigator about my heart procedure, about the doctor's warnings, about the disabled parking permit we'd never used because I was too proud. The truth has a way of finding daylight, like bodies in water, like secrets in notebooks. Madison's phone rang while the investigator was packing up her tablet. She answered without thinking, muscle memory overriding judgment, putting it on speaker out of habit. "Mom, the school saw the video." Tyler's voice filled the room, panicked and young suddenly, not the confident influencer anymore. "They're reviewing my enrollment, something about conducting policies and representing the institution. There's going to be a hearing, and they said it's open to other students because I made the incident public. Mom, you have to fix this." Madison looked at the investigator, who was writing faster now, and hung up without answering her son. "The district attorney will review this case," the investigator said as she stood to leave, her knees popping in a way that said she'd been doing this job too long. "With the video being public and your grandson's admission, charges are likely. I'm required to forward everything today. The university will be notified as part of standard procedure." She handed me a business card with the state seal embossed in blue. The kind of official card that meant this was real. This was happening. This wasn't just family drama anymore. "If you need anything, call me directly." And Mr. Walter, that video has over 300,000 views now. You might want to stay off social media for a while. After she left, Madison turned on me with tears that looked real, but felt performed, like she'd practiced them in the car on the way over. Her mascara ran in perfect lines, too symmetrical to be genuine. "Dad, you have to tell them it was just a joke. You can't let them charge Tyler. He's just a kid. This will ruin his life." But 19 isn't a kid, and we both knew it. Tyler was old enough to vote, old enough to serve in the military, old enough to know that pushing an old man who can't swim into a lake isn't funny. It's attempted murder with a laugh track. "He knew," I said quietly, letting the words sink in like water into lungs. "He knew about my heart. He knew I stopped swimming after the procedure. He visited me in the hospital, Madison. He sat in that room playing Fortnite while the doctor explained that cold water shock could trigger another cardiac event. He heard it all. He just didn't care." Madison's face crumpled, but not with shame and rage that her father wouldn't play along with the family fiction anymore. Wouldn't pretend that boys will be boys when boys become men who think consequences are for other people. Tyler showed up an hour later, having driven his BMW, the one Madison had leased for him last year, while telling me they were struggling, while asking for loans for groceries, while gambling away his future on digital coins that existed only in the imagination of people desperate enough to believe in them. He didn't knock, just walked in like he owned the place, though his name wasn't on any deed except the deed to his own destruction. But he stopped short when he saw my face. For the first time since he was 12 and got caught shoplifting Pokemon cards, I saw fear in his eyes. "Grandpa," he started, his voice different without the camera rolling. "My school's having a conduct review hearing. They might kick me out." I stood up slowly, picked up my iPad, and opened the banking app. "Watch this," I said, and transferred the remaining $3,142.18 to Brenda's personal account. The balance went to zero. "Your college fund is gone, Tyler. Your mother gambled it away on cryptocurrency. That $3,000 was all that remained." His face went through a transformation I'd only seen in time-lapse videos, from confusion to disbelief, to anger to something that might have been grief, if grief could wear a supreme hoodie and smell like Axe body spray. "But Mom said, she promised there were $20,000. I need that for tuition." He looked at Madison, who couldn't meet his eyes, who was suddenly fascinated by her phone screen, scrolling through nothing to avoid seeing something. The boy who'd laughed while I drowned was drowning now in his own way, realizing that the generational wealth he'd bragged about was as fake as his concern for my safety. Derek finally spoke up from his spot by the window where he'd been standing like furniture. "Jesus Christ, Madison. First the gambling, now this. Our son might have a criminal record because you let him believe we were rich." But Madison wasn't listening. She was scrolling through her phone, looking for something, maybe a way out, maybe another app to lose money on, maybe just avoiding the reality that her house of cards was collapsing, and she was the one who'd built it on a foundation of other people's trust. That evening, after everyone had gone, and the house was quiet, except for the grandfather clock Madison had always wanted to sell, Brenda brought me a manila folder from the investigator. She set it down carefully on the coffee table, like it contained explosives, which in a way it did. "She left this," Brenda said, her voice steady but her hands shaking. "It's a victim impact statement form. If you sign it, it becomes part of the official charges. If you don't—" She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. If I didn't, Tyler might walk away from this like he'd walked away from everything else untouched, unchanged, unrepentant. I picked up the pen Brenda had set beside the folder, feeling its weight like those 30 seconds underwater, like every year I'd worked to build something for my family, only to watch them tear it down for content. The university's conduct hearing was held in Brennan Hall. Tyler had posted about it on social media, calling it a joke of a trial, and inviting his followers to watch. 300 students packed the auditorium, phones ready to record. He'd signed a waiver allowing public access, thinking fame would save him. The dean sat at a raised table with 2 other administrators. The enormous screen behind them displayed Tyler's video in high definition. The IT department had pulled footage from multiple angles since Tyler had set up 3 phones. The enhanced video showed everything. The calculated push, my desperate fall, 30 seconds underwater while Tyler performed for his audience. The students gasped when they saw me surface, blood running down my leg, while Tyler called me dramatic and asked viewers to smash that like button. Madison wore a navy suit, probably bought with a credit card Derek didn't know about. She sat in the front row clutching her phone, typing frantically. Derek sat 3 seats away from the distance between them, speaking volumes. Tyler sat at the defendant's table, wearing a hoodie despite Madison's pleas to dress appropriately. When they called me to speak, I walked to the microphone slowly, my bandaged leg still painful. "I taught Tyler to swim when he was 5 years old," I began. 6 weeks that summer, every morning at the public pool. He was terrified of water then. I spent hours holding him up, telling him I wouldn't let go until he was ready. He trusted me then. The room stayed quiet, phones recording. At 2018, I had a cardiac procedure. Tyler visited me in the hospital. He sat beside my bed playing games while the doctor explained that cold water could trigger another episode. Tyler was 16, old enough to understand. When he pushed me into Lake Michigan 3 days ago, he knew I couldn't swim anymore. He knew it could kill me. I showed a screenshot from Tyler's Instagram. About to make the funniest content with Gramps. He has no idea what's coming. The room stirred. He planned this. He set up cameras. He did it for views. Madison burst from her seat. "This is insane. It was just a prank." She waved her phone. I have Venmo history showing I can pay back the $20,000. With what money, Madison? I turned to face her. Show them your crypto portfolio. Show them the $40,000 you lost gambling. Show them the credit cards in Derek's name. Someone had already projected Madison's public Venmo on their laptop balance. $0. Her last transaction was a $5 coffee. Madison's composed face shattered. Everyone watched with the fascinated horror reserved for public meltdowns. The dean called for order. The hearing continued with testimony from the investigator via video call about assault charges and elder abuse statutes. My doctor submitted a statement about cardiac risks. Tyler mumbled something about it being a prank gone too far. The deliberation took 15 minutes. Tyler was suspended for 1 semester, effective immediately. 100 hours of community service at senior centers, mandatory water safety course, 10-page reflection paper on elder abuse. The crowd had mixed reactions. Tyler sat frozen as his phone buzzed constantly, followers leaving, sponsors pulling out. The dean stood for her final statement. Mr. Tyler, you turned your grandfather's near death into content. You monetized a moment that could have been fatal. This university will not be associated with someone who values views over human life. The screen froze on the worst moment when I was underwater, Tyler laughing. His caption, "Grandpa goes for a swim!" As people filed out, Derek pushed through the crowd, his face red with rage. "Walter, you bastard! You think destroying my son makes you righteous?" He pulled out a legal envelope. "Check your mailbox. We'll see who wins." Madison was crying real tears now, mascara running. She tried to hug Tyler, but he walked past her, eyes fixed on nothing. The security guard handed him a box with his dorm belongings, already packed. In the parking lot, Tyler loaded his BMW while Madison gestured wildly. But Tyler wasn't listening. He was watching someone's video of his suspension, seeing his life become other people's content. The irony was perfect. Derek's lawsuit arrived the next morning via the process server. $20,000 in misappropriated education funds, plus emotional distress damages for Tyler's wrongful suspension and lost social media income. His lawyer operated from a strip mall between a payday loan place and a vape shop. I spent the morning in my home office, surrounded by file cabinets from 30 years at the IRS. I pulled out a particular file from the locked bottom drawer of Derek's brother's case from 2019. I called Derek that afternoon, suggested meeting at the Starbucks on Roosevelt Road. He arrived late in an ill-fitting suit, ordering a $7 venti drink before sitting down like this was a business negotiation. I'd brought 2 manila folders. "This one," I said, tapping the first, "is your lawsuit. Meritless. The education account has my name as primary owner since 2005. Madison was secondary, able to view but not withdraw without my signature." Derek's jaw tightened. "It was meant for Tyler's education. Madison stole it first," I said. "I'm preventing further losses." "This one." I tapped the second folder, opening it to show IRS Form 3949A. "Is more interesting." His face went white. "Your brother came to me in 2019 with an audit problem. $150,000 in fake business expenses for his supplement company. Ghost employees, who were really his kids' social security numbers. Your signature is on these documents. As a witness. As a participant." Derek's hand trembled. "That was his business. I just helped with paperwork. Here's what happens," I said, showing him my phone. "This email is ready to send to criminal investigations. 1 click, your brother faces another audit with criminal intent. 5 years minimum for this level of fraud. You might get probation, but doesn't your company have a morality clause about criminal activity?" The coffee shop continued around us, espresso machines hissing, keyboards clicking. Derek stared at the folders. "This is about Tyler. You're punishing him for a stupid mistake." "Tyler's at the senior center right now," I said. First day of community service. Washing dishes, hands in water for hours, hopefully thinking differently about water. Your brother faces 5 years. You have 30 seconds to decide. He grabbed his lawsuit folder and stood abruptly, chair scraping. You're a bastard, Walter. You destroyed your own family. But he was leaving as he said it, abandoning his expensive coffee and the IRS forms. That evening, Madison called 17 times. I didn't answer. Brenda told me later she was trying to borrow money from everyone for Tyler's tuition and a lawyer to fight the suspension. Tyler showed up around 8, no longer driving his BMW repossessed, the lease 3 months behind. He'd taken an Uber with the last of his sponsorship money. "Grandpa, can we talk?" For the first time since childhood, he wasn't recording. We sat on the back porch where he'd learned to ride a bike, where at age 10 he'd told me he wanted to be famous. "The people at the senior center," he said, staring at his hands, "recognized me. One lady called me the boy who pushed his grandfather, like I'm a monster." "Am I?" "I don't know," I said. "But monsters can choose to become human. It takes work." Madison burst through the back gate. "Tyler, we're leaving. Now!" She grabbed his arm. "Dad's poisoning you against me." Tyler looked at her like a stranger. "Mom, you lost my college money gambling. You lost $40,000. You lied for years. How is that Grandpa's fault?" "This isn't over," Madison said. But we all knew it was. She slammed the gate hard enough to knock a board loose. Tyler stayed another hour, mostly quiet. When his Uber came, he stopped at the door. "Grandpa, I've been thinking about killing myself." The words came out flat. "I posted something online. A note. But I'm not going to. I just wanted you to know how bad this is." He left before we could respond. Brenda came out with her phone, face white. "Walter, he really posted a suicide note. It's been up for an hour. The comments..." We both knew where he'd go. Lake Michigan, where everything started. The October wind off Lake Michigan cut through my jacket like accusations, each gust reminding me why I'd stopped coming here, why Water and I had made our peace by staying apart. Brenda and I pulled into the same parking area where everything had started, where Tyler had pushed me under for content, where our family had fractured like ice on warming water. Tyler's post had been live for 90 minutes now, the suicide note gaining comments like a garden growing poisonous flowers. Madison's Lexus was already there. They must have broken every speed limit. Derek's Honda sat beside it, still running, headlights cutting through the dusk like search beams looking for something already lost. We could see them on the beach from the parking lot, 3 figures arranged like a tableau of failure. Tyler stood waist-deep in the lake, and even from here I could tell he was shaking from cold, from fear, from the weight of what he'd done and what he was considering doing. His phone was propped on a rock, the ring light he'd brought making him glow like something otherworldly, live streaming to 12,000 viewers who'd come to watch the final episode of Tyler Vibes. The water had to be 50 degrees, maybe less, cold enough to shock a healthy system, cold enough to stop a broken heart. "I destroyed everything," Tyler was saying to his audience, his voice carrying across the water with a clarity that made my chest tight. "My grandpa almost died, and I laughed. I laughed while he was drowning. I turned his pain into content. I'm not a good person. I'm not even a person anymore. I'm just content, empty content." Madison and Derek stood on the shore like statues, paralyzed by the same fear that had gripped them in July. Not fear of water, but fear of getting involved, of being responsible, of having to act instead of just watch. I should have called 911, should have waited for professionals, should have done anything except what I did. But I walked into that lake like it was calling me home, like those 30 seconds in July had been practice for this moment. The cold hit like judgment, immediate and absolute, making my heart skip beats it couldn't afford to skip. My cardiologist would have been horrified. Brenda was screaming something behind me, but I kept walking, the water rising to my waist, my chest, fighting every instinct that said, "Turn back, you can't swim. You'll both die." "Grandpa?" Tyler turned, shocked to see me wading toward him, this 68-year-old man with a bad heart and bandaged leg walking into the element that had nearly killed him. "What are you doing? You can't swim! Get back!" But I kept coming, each step a victory against physics and fear. The lake bottom was slippery with algae, treacherous with rocks, but I kept moving toward my grandson who stood there like he was dissolving, like the water was erasing him pixel by pixel. "You could swim this whole time?" I said when I reached him, the water at my chest now, my feet barely touching bottom. "All those lessons when you were 5? You were playing me?" Tyler's face crumpled in a way I'd never seen. Not when his parents fought, not when he'd failed classes, not even when I'd shown him the zero balance in his college account. "I learned at camp," he admitted, "when I was 12. But you'd already given up trying to teach me, so I never told you. I wanted you to keep trying. I wanted you to keep caring." The live stream chat was scrolling so fast it looked like static. Thousands of strangers weighing in on whether we'd live or die, whether this was real or staged, whether they should call someone or just keep watching. But Tyler wasn't looking at his phone anymore. He was looking at me, this old man who couldn't swim, who was risking everything to stand in deadly water just to be near him. "Come back," I said, reaching out my hand. "We'll go together, but toward shore, toward life, toward tomorrow." Maybe it was the cold finally breaking through his shock. Maybe it was exhaustion from carrying his image for so long. Maybe it was just the realization that his grandfather was risking everything for him after he'd risked nothing for me. But Tyler started crying real tears, not the performed ones he'd used for apology videos, but the kind that come from somewhere deeper than content, from the place where humans keep their humanity. He swam toward me strong strokes that showed he'd actually become a good swimmer, and when he reached me, he held me up the way I'd tried to hold him all those years ago. We made it to shore together, him essentially carrying me, role reversal complete. On the beach, Madison was crying. Derek was filming. Of course he was filming. Muscle memory stronger than morality. And Brenda was already wrapping us in the blankets she'd grabbed from the car, the ones we kept for emergencies. Though we'd never imagined this emergency. Tyler collapsed on the sand, sobbing like his body was trying to expel not just lake water, but years of performance, years of pretending, years of choosing views over values. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," he said, but it came out broken, in pieces, like something shattered trying to reform. "Not just for pushing you, for becoming someone who could laugh while you drowned, for becoming someone who would watch you drown for content, for becoming this." His gesture took in the phone, still streaming, the parents who'd enabled him, the grandfather he'd nearly killed, the lake that had been both crime scene and confessional. The beach was filled with red and blue lights. Someone had called 911, and the EMTs were checking us for hypothermia, wrapping us in those silver emergency blankets that made us look like baked potatoes or space travelers, or people who'd gone too far to come back unchanged. Tyler's phone was still streaming, 13,000 watching now, but he wasn't performing anymore. He was just a 19-year-old kid who'd pushed his grandfather into a lake and was finally understanding what that meant, what it cost, what it revealed about who he'd become. Madison approached slowly, like we might disappear, like this might be the dream, and the influencer life was real. "Dad?" she started, but I held up my hand not to strike, not to silence, but to pause. There would be time for her apologies later. Time for her to confront what she'd lost. And why. Right now, this moment was about Tyler and choices, and the possibility that people can change even after they've gone viral for all the wrong reasons, even after they've chosen cruelty for content. "The 20,000, I said to Tyler, loud enough that Madison could hear, loud enough that Derek stopped filming, loud enough that the EMTs paused in their work. Your mother lost it 2 years ago. It's gone. Gambling on cryptocurrency, chasing highs that don't exist, believing in magic money that turned real money into nothing. Tyler nodded. He already knew this. But I have $40,000 in my retirement account. It's yours if you earn it. Madison made a sound between a gasp and a sob, hope and disbelief fighting for control of her face. 3 conditions, I continued, feeling the weight of water and words and possibility. Maintain a B average real grades, not the ones you negotiate. Finish all 200 hours at the senior center double what the court ordered, because the court doesn't know what I know about what you need. And teach me to swim, every Sunday, until I can cross this lake, until we're even, until the debt is paid and the water is just water again. Tyler looked at me like I'd offered him the moon and asked him to carry it home. You want me to teach you? After what I did? After I pushed you, laughed at you, almost killed you? But that was exactly why it had to be him. Redemption isn't given, it's earned, one stroke at a time, one Sunday at a time, one breath at a time, in the same water that tried to claim us both. Yes, I said simply. You owe me 30 seconds underwater. You can pay it back with 30 weeks of swimming lessons, maybe more, however long it takes for both of us to trust the water again, to trust each other again. The math was simple. The swimming would be hard. The forgiveness would be harder. But it was possible. And possible was all we had. Madison finally found her voice, and it came out cracked like ice in spring. Dad? I'm sorry. About money, the gambling, everything. I know I ruined, but I cut her off. Not cruelly, but firmly, like closing a door on a draft. Sorry doesn't bring back 30 seconds of my life, Madison. But Tyler's actions from now on might bring back something else. Maybe the boy I taught to ride a bike. Maybe the grandson who used to call me his hero before he learned that heroes don't get views. Derek had stopped recording, his phone hanging loose in his hand like a vestigial organ he'd forgotten the purpose of. The sun was setting behind us, painting the lake gold and pink and impossible. The same colors as that 4th of July, but different now, transformed by what had happened in the water and on the shore. Tyler was looking at his streaming phone, at the viewer count that had climbed to 15,000, at the comments that had shifted from cruel to confused to something that might have been respect, or just relief that nobody had died. I'm deleting it, Tyler said suddenly, crawling toward his phone, still wrapped in the emergency blanket. All of it. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, everything. Madison started to protest that those accounts were worth money, had sponsorship potential, could be salvaged. But Tyler was already doing it, his fingers moving across the screen with the same speed he'd used to build his following, but in reverse, undoing years of work in seconds. The final thing he posted, before deleting everything, was just text on a black background. Growing up means knowing when to stop performing. It got 50,000 views in 10 minutes, but Tyler didn't see them. He was done with views, done with content, done with turning life into performance. He looked at the lake one more time, then back at me. Every Sunday. We'll start this weekend, he said. I nodded, feeling Brenda's hand find mine, warm and sure, despite everything, despite our grandson having tried to kill me, despite our daughter having gambled away his future, despite our family having fractured in public for everyone to see.